Right, I see some people jumping into the Zoom here as well. Great, so just to kind of update those of you that are joining, we've got the Zoom room, and those of you that are in Zoom as in the meeting as a participant, feel free to either unmute yourself or type any questions you have in the chat. For those of you that are kind of sitting in the group setting and may not be logged directly into the Zoom room, feel free to use this Menti code. You can use your phone or open up a new browser tab using the information here, and you can type your questions in, and I can see them on my end as well. So you can hit that little discussion icon at the bottom of this page, and it'll pop up a little entry window where you can type those questions in, and I can see those pop up on my end as well. Great, I see a few more of you in there already as we're getting set here. And then Audra, if you want to let me know if you guys are ready, I can jump in whenever you guys are ready. Yeah, no problem. You don't have to do the interaction. I can take care of that. So thanks. And here's what the questions look like. All right. So this is what it looks like on my end. So you're kind of anonymous there if you use the Menti thing to ask questions. So we'll definitely cover that. So should you apply for public service loan forgiveness, but definitely a lot of questions to get through today, and we'll see how much of this content we can get through this evening. I got a pretty ambitious slide deck here, but we'll kind of get started with some of the foundational things, what's changed, what's going on with student debt, and what you should be thinking about as you're working your way through your advanced training. So my name is Tony Bartels. I'm a veterinarian and employee of the Veterinary Information Network, or VIN. I'm also a board member for VIN Foundation, where a lot of this student debt education falls into. So we're pretty busy doing a lot of educational sessions for pre-vets, vet students, veterinarians, interns, residents, pretty much the whole gamut of a veterinary professional career, because unfortunately, as you all have experienced, student debt touches pretty much every part of it, or it can if you're using student loans to pay for your veterinary education, which is about 80% of us in most cases. So a lot of different considerations, particularly at the internship residency level, and different things that are going on there. And then of course we've got, we pretty much changed the entire system here this summer, and we need to understand, what's changed, what's changing for you, what are things likely to look like in the next 6 months, 12 months, 5 years from now with student loans. It's still a little bit, up in the air, but after the passage of the recent tax and spending legislation on July 4th, so the big beautiful bill was signed, and there was a big chunk of that changed how student loan borrowing and repayment will work, right? So we'll have to navigate what that looks like specifically for you, and that's what we're really going to focus on in the early part of this, and then we can dive into some more specific questions. All right, so some of you may, especially if you went to school at UC Davis, you may have heard me talk about student loans, and just a couple of years ago we were talking about how great the SAVE, or Saving on a Valuable Education Plan, would be, particularly during internship and residencies. And then SAVE got caught up in the courts, and pretty much the recent legislation stuck a fork in SAVE, right? So SAVE is pretty much dead. It's still out there, but it really doesn't function as a repayment option anymore. And many of you probably have your loans in a SAVE forbearance that started to accrue interest recently, and are probably looking to see what's next, right? So unfortunately, SAVE is not likely to come back, at least not in the short term. But we did add a new repayment plan. It's not available yet, but we'll talk about that in some detail. Public service loan forgiveness is still available, so that did not get changed by the legislation. There are some attempts to alter it outside of the legislative process. I don't anticipate much of that will affect many veterinarians. I mean, I'm sure there will be some, but we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. But public service loan forgiveness is still a very real thing, and those of you that are doing your training at an academic institution like UC Davis should be at least logging that credit while you're there, just in case you go on to continue working in a public service oriented career path or with a public service employer. Right now, the big question is, what do I do? If SAVE is kind of going away, what do I use during the rest of my training? I mean, are you eligible for pay as you earn? That's still going to be around for at least a little while. And then IBR is going to be around for the long haul, but it got changed a little bit in the recent legislation. So which one you should choose depends on which plans you're eligible for. So that's what we're going to talk about predominantly with what I call the student loan physical exam. Deferment is still a no-no, right? So we do not want your loans to be in deferment. The SAVE forbearance is a little bit of a special use case. It was really beneficial while the interest was off, but now the interest is back on as of August 1st. So probably going to want to move those loans out of SAVE depending on which options you're eligible for. And we do not want them in deferment. Right? Deferment is really not terribly helpful. So the income-driven plans are going to be a little bit better while you're navigating that advanced training. All right, so just to kind of let you in on the little secret. So the secret to student loan repayment is your loans will be gone one way or another, right? It's like all bleeding stops, right? I mean, your loans will be gone one way or another. You're going to earn enough to have a high enough payment to hit a zero balance, or you're going to hit forgiveness, right? Those are the two possible outcomes with your federal student loans. Either is fine, right? You don't have to try to force one versus the other. They will have different cost profiles. Ideally, you're going to want to pick the one that's going to be the most cost beneficial for you, particularly if something like public service loan forgiveness is involved. But the big key takeaway here is to not pay more than your income requires you to pay, and don't sacrifice critical areas of your overall financial wellness just to pay your student loans back faster than your income may allow. Right now, some of you that are in this advanced training pathway are going to come out on the other side of that and earn some pretty significant income, right? That's the time when maybe accelerating your student loan payoff will make sense, right? But maybe not, right? It really depends on what your balance is, what your income is, and what repayment options you have available to you, right? So, but again, either way, your student loans are going to be gone. But how do we get them there, right? And this is where that student loan physical exam comes into play, right? We're going to, try to make sure we understand our loan types. Obviously, the amounts are important, but the types and which options you're able to use, particularly in this transitionary environment we're in, are a little bit more important than the amounts, right? So trying to understand what options do I have for making payments? How do I keep those payments reasonable? And then ultimately, how do I make a payment that's forgiveness eligible, whether that's public service loan forgiveness or income-driven repayment forgiveness, just in case I do end up hitting forgiveness, right? So you want to log that progress, and not all loan statuses and not all payments are considered to be forgiveness eligible. So trying to make sure that we wade through that. During this transition phase, particularly with the SAVE forbearance and all the confusion going on there, trying to understand what our minimum monthly payments either are now or what they could be. We also have to look at what our monthly interest accrual is again. Back when SAVE was a thing, interest was covered for you, and that was awesome during these low income years while you're doing your advanced training, but that's gone. Right, so they turned the interest back on, even for those loans that were in the SAVE forbearance on August 1st. So generally speaking, you're not getting any kind of benefit by leaving your loans in SAVE. So it's probably better to move them into a plan, even if it has a small monthly payment, into something that gives you some forgiveness credit. Unfortunately, we don't have any way of postponing the interest for you, but when the new repayment option comes online, so a new repayment assistance plan, or RAP as it's being referred to as, does have a unpaid interest subsidy just like SAVE did. Right, so they eliminated one, they're going to create a new one, but it's not yet available and it's not scheduled to be available until next summer. So that could be an option that is helpful to some of you, particularly those of you that have higher student loan balances and might be earlier in your training rather than finishing your training. So it kind of depends on where you are in that timeline as well. All right, so kind of the big question, what's happening with all these income-driven repayment options, and what's going to be available when they get done, right? So, I see a question about pay as you earn and it going away too. And yeah, pay as you earn is also on the chopping block, but it is not going to be eliminated until July 1st of 2028. So if pay as you earn is an option for you, or you're using pay as you earn, you can still log forgiveness progress, public service loan forgiveness credit. But after July 1st, 2028, you will no longer be able to use pay as you earn. You'll have to choose a different option. And that's going to then involve, well, what other options do I have available? So, and I left this in here because I don't really know. Some of you, these residency training programs and advanced training, it encompasses a lot. And some of you may still be taking loans depending on the programs you're in. It's probably rare, but I do see it occasionally. Some of you are, either doing a master's or maybe a PhD, and some of that might require you to take a loan while you're doing your training. And that can complicate things, because this transition phase we're in will change the options you have available to you if you have to take a loan after July 1st of 2026. Right. So if that's any of you, ask some questions, right? Because if you're done borrowing, right now, most of you probably are done borrowing, but if you are in a program that will require you to take a loan after July 1st of 2026, then you're going to lose access to all of the prior income-driven repayment options, and you'll only have the new repayment assistance program available to you. Right now, if you're not going to be taking a loan after July 1st of 2026, then you don't have to worry about it, right? You're going to have the options that you currently have at least through 2028, when pay and save technically are formally eliminated. Right? And at that point, if you're still using pay as you earn, you'll have to choose one of the remaining options, which are going to be income-based repayment, depending on the version you're eligible for, and this new repayment assistance program, or RAP. So that's the changes that have taken place in a nutshell. There's a lot more on the borrowing side of things that are pertain to students, particularly that are going to be starting next fall, but even some of the ones that are starting school now. All right, so when will you have to switch out of pay? If you don't switch before July 1st of 2028, they will switch you automatically. Right, so you'll have an opportunity to choose one before July 1st of 2028. And if you don't, then after July 1st, 2028, they will either put you into RAP or one of the other versions of IBR that you're eligible for. So better for you to choose than to let them automatically choose for you. So this is where we're going to talk a lot about this in the next few minutes, but I call it your IDR plan profile. So already IDR stands for income-driven repayment. Income-driven repayment is the term, the umbrella term that's used to describe all of these different and specific income-driven repayment options. So income-based repayment is a type of IDR. RAP is a type of IDR. Pay-as-you-earn is a type of IDR, right? But the specific names, so pay as you earn, IBR, RAP, those are the specific options under that IDR umbrella. And that just means that they use your income to calculate the payment rather than basing the payment off of the loan balance and the interest rate. So what is your IDR plan profile? For that, we need to understand our student loans. And this is where we gotta get into the nitty gritty of the student loan physical exam. So you're most likely going to have either a combination of direct unsubsidized and direct grad plus loans, or direct loans plus these health profession student loans. Some of you might even have a loans for disadvantaged students floating around. These are all federal student loan types. The income-driven repayment options are only available for the direct loans. Right, so if you have one of these other federal student loan types, you may want to consolidate it into a direct consolidation loan so you can make those loans also eligible for income-driven repayment or public service loan forgiveness. But depending on how much you have and what your career path is and how much you are anticipating earning after your training, you may want to leave those health profession student loans or loans for disadvantaged students alone, because they have a pretty low interest rate. And if your income is going to exceed your debt after you finish your training, you may benefit from just leaving them as is, right? Because it'll cost you less to pay those down. You can also defer those with no interest for the duration of your training, right? So it really kind of depends on the makeup of your overall student loan portfolio and what you see yourself doing as to whether or not you should consolidate those health profession student loans. All right. So, and this is where if you guys have the ability, and you can actually put it into the discussion thing and in the mentee discussion thing, and I can see those answers there, or you can type it into the Zoom chat. But tell me what status your loans are in now. If you know what repayment option your loans are in or what status they're in otherwise, tell me, right? Because I'm kind of curious to hear from you all on what your student loan status is. And if you don't know, I'm going to show you how you can find that out, right? So if you know, great, let me know. If not, I'm going to show you here in just a minute. I think I see somebody. I see consolidated. So I'm consolidated. Okay, that's not really a status though, right? So I'm trying to understand if your loans are in repayment, right? Are you in a repayment plan that has a minimum monthly payment, or are they in the forbearance, the save forbearance? Are they in deferment? Right? What status are your loans in? Like, are you making payments? Are you not making payments? And if you're not making payments, why? Right? Or what is there some reason why you're not making payments? So that's kind of what I'm looking for when I say loan status. I've been paid, but I do not need to pay currently. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there, right? Now, I'm in pay, but I don't need to pay currently. Is that because your income is low enough to have a $0 payment? Or is that because your loans are in some state of forbearance because you submitted a pay-as-you-earn application, maybe 2 years ago, and it's still stuck in a processing status, right? Those are different things, right? And there's a lot of that going on because of all of the transitionary environment of student loans, particularly in the last couple of years. So repayment, great. So if you're in repayment, we're going to want to know how much is it and how does that compare to your income, and make sure that it's the lowest amount possible. So to start this process, and if you have access to a computer while you're watching this too, I would encourage you to follow along. Log into studentaid.gov, and I'll do that here with my loans here and show you what it looks like if you haven't been in here in a while. Usually pretty fast on the code. Oh, sent me a bunch of different ones all at once. See if the last one works. All right, let me try. All right, so a bunch of scary language. So this is what studentaid.gov. Oh, now it wants me to confirm my contact information. Of course, great. Now you guys all have my cell phone number. All right, so on this dashboard, it's going to show you a summary of your loans, right? So here's my principal, here's my interest. I can see they finally turned the interest back on. Mine said 10,000 a little bit ago. So, maybe a month or two ago. So interest is definitely accruing again, but this isn't really enough information. It's, I can see who my servicer is, so Nelnet. Theoretically, I have a due date of November 2nd, but my loans are in the save forbearance. I'm kind of transitioning out of that. So I'm not sure if I should believe that or not. But the page I really want to take you to is this view details here. So click that button and it'll take you to the next page where you'll see a download my aid data button, right? So if I click this is going to generate this text file, an ugly looking text file that will contain my complete history of higher education borrowing, right? And I'm going to take that text file and I'm going to put it into the VIN Foundation Student Debt Center. And a few of you did that. And that is super helpful too. I did see any feedback on that. Let me know. What exactly was the reason why you didn't finish that particular submission. That would be helpful to know. But when you get to the My Student Loans page, if you're not already logged into VIN, you can see it knows that I'm logged in. It'll ask you to log in before you can use the My Student Loans tool. Right. So if we log in there, I'm already logged in. I'm going to upload a file, or actually, sorry, you guys, if you're done borrowing, you can use this button all the way on the right here. And I've got some anonymized versions of these that I put together here. All right. So once you upload the file, it's going to give you some summary. If we find that you're using an income-driven repayment plan and you have an anniversary date, like this person's using pay-as-you-earn, when you use an income-driven plan, you have to provide updated income information, generally yearly, right? That whole process has been destroyed since the pandemic, and they've tried to restart it a couple of different times, and it was a total mess. But we're getting closer to something that resembles what things used to look like back before the pandemic. But it's caused a lot of anniversary dates to get kicked into the future, right? So you can see this person's anniversary date is until next summer. So either they've recently provided income information or their anniversary date just got pushed into 2026. There's a lot of folks that have had their anniversary date just pushed into the future, even without having to provide updated income information. So that's one of the other pieces of information that we're going to want to check. But in here, obviously we've got the amounts, the unpaid interest. So this is interest that accrues on the principal, right? The total owed is the principal plus the unpaid interest. Over the one remaining loan here, we've got a 6.13 weighted average interest rate, right? So this is a consolidated loan that's left, right? So maybe the person that said, hey, I'm consolidated, right? That could be what this is referring to, right? This person's entire balance is made up of a remaining consolidated loan from their minimum monthly payment is $179 per month, and the interest that accrues is $1,078. Right, so those are the things that I'm kind of taking stock of, looking at to just understand the repayment or this, kind of the overall status of the loans. We do have a loan status field here, right? So RP refers to in repayment, right? And you can kind of see the various states that your loans have been in over time, which could be relevant, right? Particularly when you're doing internship residency. And if you have a $0 payment, it can be very difficult to differentiate a $0 payment from something like a forbearance or a deferment, right? And that's where knowing your loan status is helpful, right? So if you upload your file into the tool here and you click on that loan status, you'll see what your active loan status is. The other really important area in here in our student loan physical exam is the IDR eligibility, right? So this is what helps us to know if we wanted to use another plan, which one can we use, right? And this person is an IDR profile 1. These are things that I created, right? IDR profile 1 is not something the Department of Education refers to. It was just something that I use when I try to talk about these to make them a little bit easier to understand. And there's several different IDR profiles, but IDR profile 1 is the most flexible of all of them, right? So if you were using SAVE and your loans are stuck in that SAVE forbearance and you're in IDR profile 1, that means you're able to use either pay-as-you-earn or the new version of IBR. They're pretty much identical, right? But as we talked about earlier, pay-as-you-earn is going away after 2028. The new version of IBR, IBR 2014, is sticking around, right? So this is anybody that is in IDR profile 1 is eligible for the new version of IBR, which I refer to as IBR 2014, because that's when it came online. This is a super beneficial remaining income driven plan, right? It still allows you to reach forgiveness after 20 years of qualifying payments, just like Pay As You Earn did, right? So it can make reaching forgiveness a very real possibility for many of you, even if you're going to go on and be a surgeon and earn $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. You can still reach forgiveness using a plan like IBR 2014 because it also caps your monthly payment at the standard 10-year plan amount. So for this person with a $234,000 balance and 6% interest rate, roughly, the standard 10-year payment cap is probably somewhere around $2,400 or $2,500 per month in a plan like IBR 2014. That means your payment will never be higher than that. So, if it takes you 5-6 years to get through your training and you've got 5 or 6 years of forgiveness qualifying time, and it takes you a bit to ramp up on your income as a specialist, there's still a very good chance that you're going to hit forgiveness using this new version of IBR. Right, now, that doesn't necessarily mean you should all run out and switch to IBR 2014 now, right? And it's because IBR has a really funny quirk where if you leave IBR for any reason, the unpaid interest gets capitalized. And what does that mean? Right? It means that they'll take this $23,000 and they'll add it to your principal. The higher your principal, the more interest accrues. It's one of the only instances that remains after all of the changes to federal student loans over the last several years where they will capitalize your interest. For some reason, they left that part of the law that governs IBR that says if you leave IBR, any unpaid interest you have gets added to your principal. If you leave Pay As You Earn, that doesn't happen, right? So if you use Pay As You Earn until July 1st of 2028 and you had $20,000, $30,000 of unpaid interest, it will not get added to your principal. It'll just stay in this unpaid interest bucket. And that's really beneficial because you don't get charged any additional interest on this unpaid interest, right? You get charged interest on the principal, but not the additional unpaid interest. So to the extent that you can avoid having your loans capitalize, you want to try to avoid it, which is why we don't want to all run into the new version of IBR now, even if we're eligible for it. Instead, it's better to go to Pay first and then switch to IBR in 2028, or depending on your circumstances, you may find the new repayment assistance plan will be more beneficial at that time, right? But if you leave yourself that option, so you use Pay As You Earn until 2028 and you have a bunch of unpaid interest, then regardless of where you switch next, whether it's IBR or RAP, you won't see your unpaid interest capitalized, right? So that'll save you some time and money in repayment. So a lot of good stuff in here. Right now, if you're not in IDR Profile 1, right, maybe IDR Profile 2, where you're not eligible for the new version of IBR, and have Pay As You Earn as your best remaining option, you're in the group of folks that are kind of getting screwed the worst, right? Because you had access to a 20-year repayment option and now you don't, right? So you're going to get stuck with either going to old IBR, which is like my situation, or you can use the new repayment assistance plan. The old version of IBR has a higher monthly payment, a longer time to forgiveness, and then the new RAP plan has a 30-year forgiveness timeframe. So generally speaking, RAP is probably not going to result in forgiveness for a lot of people, but it could still be a helpful way to keep your interest low and pay back your loans depending on your circumstances. So we're trying to help people just maximize their options and prevent this unpaid interest from getting added to their principal. If you're an IDR Profile 1, go to Pay, maybe switch to the new version of IBR or RAP when it's time to do so. So 2028, it depends on what your circumstances are at that time. And then you can send this over to the loan repayment simulator. I'm not going to do that just yet. I want to work through a few more of these, and then we can come back to that. So check out your IDR plan profile. Most of you, I imagine, are probably in IDR Profile 1. Some of you are probably in IDR Profile 2. Fewer of you should be in IDR Profile 3, unless maybe you're an academician there that's been graduated for a little while, right? So that could be a possibility. Let's go through a few of these just to show you how this works. What's the best way to pay back your student loans? Use the flexibility that your federal student loans provide, right? You will never have another set of loans that will be as flexible as your US federal student debt. Right? I know it doesn't feel that way and you just want them to be gone, but they are the most flexible debt you will ever have. Right? You will never again have the option of having your debt be based on your income, right? With the possibility of forgiveness, right? That is hugely beneficial, right? I know everybody wants to get these things gone as fast as possible, but in a lot of cases, for a lot of veterinarians, whether you're in a very lucrative specialty or maybe not so lucrative specialty, forgiveness can be an outcome that will save you tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on your student loans. So it's worth understanding how they work. Right? If you just treat them like any other random credit card debt or an auto loan or something, you're going to end up paying more than you have to and probably sacrificing other areas of your overall financial wellness. And it's just not worth it. Right? So it is worth your time to understand a little bit about how they work. So when I look at what's the best strategy for my student loans, it's the one that reduces the risk to myself and my family, gives me the most control over my monthly cash flow, my income, and how I use it. Right? Ideally, I want to pay the least amount possible, but if it's close to the least amount possible, but still gives me all that cash flow flexibility, that's good enough. Right? And I really want to earn forgiveness credit just in case I need it. Right? You never know what the future is going to hold. Right? Income-driven plans have very specific rules in terms of what is forgiveness eligible and what is not. Right? And making payments during a forbearance or using a standard 25-year plan or a 30-year graduated plan are not forgiveness eligible. Right? So you want to make payments that give you that forgiveness credit. So if you do end up needing forgiveness, you hit it as soon as you can, because that will reduce your overall repayment cost and time in repayment. Right? So better to log that forgiveness time just in case you need it than not, right? Because we can't really go back in time and get forgiveness in a lot of cases or get credit for the time our loans have spent in repayment. All right, repayment options briefly, right? So I do have a blog post here, and this is on vinfoundation.org that talks a little bit more about if you're looking for a place to go after save, choose pay as you earn if you're eligible, right? But that does require you to be in IDR profile 1 or 2. You do have the option of making payments on a time-driven scale. I generally don't recommend it, one, particularly for any internal resident, because you're just not earning enough income. If you have very, very low student loan balance, then maybe it'll work, right? But most of us don't, right? It's usually in that six-figure range, and it might be in that 200, 300 range, right? And those standard plan payments are just more than, in some cases, you're taking home, right? So it's not even really a possibility. But we don't want to move into those automatically after we finish our training, because again, they don't really provide forgiveness credit, right? And chances are you can get a lower monthly payment, not only during your training, but in the year or two after you complete your training, because they use your recent tax return as a way of documenting or calculating your monthly payment. Right. So if you kind of think about, and some of you maybe have now had an opportunity to file a tax return or two, when you finish your residency training and maybe you pass your boards and you start a job at a private practice and your income triples or whatever, that's not going to hit your tax return immediately, right? You're going to have some income from your residency training, maybe blended with some of your income from your, post-training activities. And that's what's going to hit your tax return. So you'll kind of build this on-ramp of monthly payments for your student loans, which gives you some time to play some catch up on other financial wellness items like saving for retirement, building an emergency fund, paying off less flexible debt like credit cards or auto loans or personal loans or anything else that you may have racked up during your training, saving for a down payment on a home or a practice or starting your own gig kind of thing. You're going to want to have more cash rather than less. And these are areas where you can find it, is using an income-driven plan instead of trying to have a payment that's not based on what you're earning. We covered a lot of this, right? So the income-driven plans, there's a lot of different versions out there. It's going to simplify, right? So the revised pay-as-you-earn, gone. Saving on a valuable education, gone. ICR, which is really not beneficial for anybody, is going away as well. Pay-as-you-earn is going to get phased out. The repayment assistance plan is going to come online, right? So that will be helpful down the road, particularly for folks in advanced training. So if you're just getting started, you're going to want to keep your eye on this RAP plan, right? Because it comes with that 100% unpaid interest subsidy, meaning the payments will be very similar to what they were, using an IBR or even save, and the interest won't get added to your balance, right? So anything that you make a payment on that doesn't cover the interest, the Department of Education covers all of that interest for you in that RAP plan. Forgiveness eligible, theoretically, a 10-year standard plan is forgiveness eligible, but it's really hard to get them to recognize that as credit. So I don't recommend people do that. It's easier to kind of go with the ones that we know are going to provide forgiveness credit rather than try to fight the system for it. Anything beyond a 10-year plan is not forgiveness eligible, which is another reason why I don't recommend using them. And deferment, as we talked about, is a no-no. So the reason why deferment is a no-no is your interest racks up. When you leave deferment, they often capitalize that interest. They will take that unpaid interest and add it to your principal, right? Which just will charge you more interest going forward. How do they calculate your payment? I'll send you guys these slides, but this is helpful in math checking. Hey, what's my current monthly payment? We saw in that example that I was using previously that the minimum monthly payment was $179 per month. That sounds reasonable to me for pay-as-you-earn as an intern. It really depends on what you are, or a resident. It depends on what your actual adjusted gross income is, right? But that's less than I'm calculating using what VIRMP is showing that you're earning, right? So I would expect it to be around $240 a month if your adjusted gross income equaled your gross income for that internship or residency. So this is how they calculate those payments. RAP is a little bit more complicated. It depends on where your income falls on a scale. For any income above $50,000 up to $60,000, they'll take 5% of your adjusted gross income to calculate your payment. So it's pretty comparable, especially when your income's at the lower end of the scale. I've got a little chart here that kind of compares what those payments are. But the RAP payments, particularly in the early years, are very similar to what they were under, or are under, pay-as-you-earn and IBR. It depends on where you are in the earning spectrum. IBR 2009 is not as beneficial as RAP, but it does have a 25-year forgiveness horizon, which is a little better. I'm going to put this on the income renewal side of things. You do have to provide income information each year, at least, right? So knowing what your anniversary date is really helpful. Your income information is due at least 35 days before your anniversary date. So your anniversary date is actually your expiration date for that monthly payment cycle that you're currently on. For instance, this person who has $179 monthly payment, their anniversary date is June 25th of 2026. This is the last day where their monthly payment will be $179. So you have to provide updated income information at least 35 days before this date in order for them to update that payment so it doesn't revert to a standard 10-year plan payment automatically. And that's what happens if you don't provide them income information on time, is they say, okay, well, they didn't give us the income information, so the rules say we have to set the payment back at the standard 10-year plan amount, which in this case would be that $2,300 a month we were talking about, right? So that can be a pretty significant increase. So make sure you get that income information submit it on time, and then they process that information accordingly. You can always use your recently filed tax return as valid income documentation. You can consider that the gold standard. So if no matter what happens during that year, if you go back and look at that previous filed tax return and it's lower than your current income, you can still use that. Right now, if your current income is lower than your previously filed tax return income, which can happen, particularly if you came from a private practice internship and now you're doing an academic residency, you may have taken a pay cut, right? Which means you may want to use your more current income information because it will generate a lower monthly payment, right? So those are things that you can use to your advantage if you understand how the system calculates your payments. It will take you longer if you provide them something other than your tax return because it's just more complicated. Usually it's a pay stub or some other kind of income documentation that you submit, and then somebody has to review that and then calculate it correctly. So it's just a little bit more back and forth than you may be used to. Monitor those anniversary dates. You want to know what those are showing. All right, let me show you another example here. This person has a little bit more student loan balance, but this one also, so public service loan forgiveness. I saw some questions about public service loan forgiveness as well. So you can earn public service loan forgiveness credit while you're doing an internship / residency, as long as you're labeled as an employee with a qualifying organization. All right, so that is a nonprofit, a 501c3. UC Davis is a 501c3 nonprofit. The trick can sometimes be whether or not they consider you an employee. Right now, the rules around that say that you're employed, averaging at least 30 hours per week. Right now, some people will read that and interpret it differently, and others will not. So it really depends on whether or not you can find somebody to sign off on your public service loan forgiveness employment certification form. I believe every academic resident should be earning public service loan forgiveness, but I don't get to sign all of the forms, right? It's up to you to find somebody there that will sign that on your behalf. And just because maybe one person doesn't mean you shouldn't try another person. Great. Audra says that's her. Sign it. That's great. If you'll sign them, then that's wonderful, right? Because that's what it requires is somebody other than you in that employee organization relationship to say that you're meeting those public service loan forgiveness employment requirements, right? And then once you submit that, you'll start to see that time get logged in your student aid file, which is another reason why you want to check that file periodically. You may even see it on your student aid dashboard, right? So when you log into studentaid.gov, you'll see how much time you have credited towards public service loan forgiveness on your dashboard as well. If not, I'm always looking at the file to see. Here we have at least 2 months logged, right? So, if you think you should have more time logged than what you see in your file, then submit another public service loan forgiveness employment certification form, right? They're always kind of retroactive, right? They don't go in here and update that credit until they hear from you, right? So you have to submit that public service loan forgiveness employment certification form in order to get that progress acknowledged retroactively, right? So maybe every 12 months or when you submit your income documentation is a good time to submit another public service loan forgiveness employment certification form. This person, here's another person who's got an anniversary date in 2026. Now, this isn't technically as relevant because their loans are in the save forbearance. How do I know that? The repayment plan says save. If I click on the loan status, it shows forbearance, right? So the save forbearance started around July of 2024. Here, this person's loans were put into forbearance in August of 2024. Now, that means they don't have a payment due, but interest is accruing, right? So generally, we would prefer to get these loans into another plan. So this person is an IDR Profile 1. So this person should apply for pay as you earn, try to get the lowest monthly payment they can based on the income documentation they have available, and then submit another public service loan forgiveness employment certification form. Unfortunately, you won't be able to get any public service loan forgiveness credit for the time in the save forbearance. That's a little more than 12 months at this point. So get your loans into a qualifying plan and then submit another public service loan forgiveness employment certification form so you can start that progress clock ticking again. All right, so a couple of questions here that I saw come in. I started pay-as-you-earn at the end of vet school with no income and my payments were zero. They prolonged my recertification date and my new salary is not in, so my payment is still zero. Is that bad? It's not bad as long as your loans are still showing that they're in pay-as-you-earn and in repayment, right? So this is where you want to check. Upload your student aid data file, and if you're in pay-as-you-earn and your loan status says repayment and you see a monthly payment of zero, then you're good, right? And if your anniversary date is, some month in 2026, then you should be getting forgiveness credit for that time, those $0 payment times in pay-as-you-earn. The problem would be is if your loans say pay-as-you-earn and your loan status says forbearance, right? Because there is a lot of that out there right now too, because there was a huge upheaval at the beginning of this year where people were due to start renewing their income and then they stopped the system, right? They turned the system off and they pretty much ignored all of those recertification requests and they put people's loans into forbearance. And if they haven't gotten around to processing your application again or pushing your loans back into repayment with the previous payment and kicking the anniversary date into the future, then your loans might be in forbearance. And it's very difficult to know superficially the difference between a $0 payment that's in repayment versus a forbearance that also has no payment due, right? So the only way that I know that you can see that is in your student aid data file and looking at all of the ugly data in that file, or you can upload it into the My Student Loans tool and see it this way, the way that I'm showing you here, right? And that's the way that when we provide personalized consultations on VIN and people are trying to figure that out, this is how we answer those questions for them, is putting that data into this tool so we can look at that and then have that conversation on the message boards. And that brings me to remind myself to show you guys what that looks like. So as part of the Signalman form submissions, if you want, you have the opportunity to check that anonymous checkbox, which means we'll take your Signalman form submission and summarize it and post it anonymously on the VIN message boards, right? And I'll show you what that looks like. So if you're logged in using your VIN username and password, and any academic intern, resident, academician at an academic institution has free access to VIN, right? So please use that, right? But you'll have a VIN username and password, which we require you to use to log into the Student Debt Center, and it'll take you to the Student Debt Message Board area. The Student Debt Message Board area is where we provide personalized assistance, right? So we kind of borrow from, what makes VIN, colleagues helping colleagues, where veterinarians are posting questions about clinical cases. And here we have a student debt area that is largely structured the exact same way, right? So here we've got a 2024 Ohio State graduate that's in equine practice. Here's their student debt, what repayment plan they're using. Here's their income, right? Kind of parallels that internship experience, right? Here's their concerns, right? How are they going to pay their student loans, preferably as fast as possible? And then we go through, my colleague, Dr. Rebecca Mears, and I go through and do this physical exam on your loans, right? So we kind of review what we see using the My Student Loans tool, show you what your options are and how you can compare paying your loans back, in this case, maybe something as fast as possible versus using an income-driven strategy, right? It's very difficult to pay your loans back as fast as possible when you're earning 32 grand a year, right? I mean, that's financial damage control, right? But after you finish that, maybe we can reevaluate, right? But trying to get your loans there to that point where we can then evaluate without adding more cost and time is the goal here. And the reason why we like to do these on the message boards is then that person can come back here and post another signalman form or another set of questions, right? We can see we're on the next physical exam for this person, right? So it's as your career unfolds and your circumstances change and the rules change around you, you can come back to this dedicated discussion that you have, add those new questions, and we can walk through them based on what we've covered with you before and your updated student loan data, right? So you can see you're able to post anonymously here. Myself and Dr. Mears will know who you are, but the rest of the community does not. You get the answers that you need. The rest of the community gets to learn from the exchange as well. Right, so that's where all of the experience we have with helping veterinarians navigate student loans comes from. I mean, there are thousands of these discussions in here, right? So you can see ones that either match your own, or you can opt to have that help for you. So I would encourage you. I mean, there was a couple of you that submitted that said that they were just case discussions for tonight. There's a couple of you that I have some pretty significant questions on, like, hey, I think you've got some opportunities to either earn public service loan forgiveness here, or hit income-driven plan forgiveness based on what you included. But if we can't really dive deeper into the situation, it's kind of hard to know that, right? So, and these group settings are great for kind of giving you that baseline and answering some general questions, but really digging into the specifics that usually involves your income and family circumstances and what your spouse earns and all of that jazz is a little more difficult to do in the group settings, right? So I would highly encourage you to allow us to post some of those submissions here so we can go through that personalized analysis with you and help you benefit from these options that you have available to you with the federal student loans and the income-driven repayment options. If you just shoot me an email after this session and say, hey, I'd like to change my submission to have it post on the boards, I can make that happen, right? We can put it into our system where it'll then post this onto the boards, and it'll put it in our queue to help reply to you and get you the answers to your questions. All right, so speaking of questions, so should you apply for public service loan forgiveness now? Absolutely, right? I mean, ideally, you want your loans in a status other than save, because we know for the last 12 months, that time's not going to be eligible, right? But if your loans are in some other plan that is eligible for public service loan forgiveness, then submit a public service loan forgiveness employment certification form and see if you can get your count updated. Yeah, I am concerned that pay as you earn is going away, but there's nothing you can do about it right now, right? So they changed that in the law, and they said, pay as you earn, ICR, and save, to the extent the courts allow them to exist, will no longer exist after July 1st of 2028. Now, could we see that change after 2028? Maybe, right? But that's a lot of hope and a long time from now. So right now, I'm going to assume that pay as you earn is going to go away as it's scheduled to go away, and that you will need to choose another option, which means you should know what that option will be for you. If it's IBR 2014, great. RAP should be available by then as well. If that's going to be a better option for you, then we can look at that for your circumstances at that time as well. But use pay now. It's a great option to help you get to when RAP is available, or use it until July 1st of 2028 if you need to. Sorry about that. So July 1st of 2028 is when you would have to switch out of pay as you earn. All right. Let's see. These are your submissions on your status, which is great. Is IBR 2014 have a 10-year track, or is it based on income? So thanks for asking that question. So IBR is the repayment option, right? 10 years is public service loan forgiveness, right? So I've got a slide in here on public service loan forgiveness. So in order for you to earn public service loan forgiveness, you have to have direct loans using an income-driven plan, so something like IBR 2014, pay as you earn, or RAP, and make 120 monthly qualifying payments. Right? If you make 120 monthly qualifying payments doing all of those things, then you are eligible to receive public service loan forgiveness at that 10-year mark, right? And your loans would be forgiven tax-free, right? So there is quite a bit, I find a lot of confusion between those things, but you can't put your loans in public service loan forgiveness, right? Public service loan forgiveness is the benefit that you earn after you do all of these things correctly, right? And one of those things is using a plan like IBR to help get you across that 120 monthly qualifying payment finish line, right? So your loans have to be in one of those income-driven plans like IBR, pay-as-you-earn, RAP, for 120 monthly payments before you can receive public service loan forgiveness. All the time is transferable, right? So if you've got 3 years of payments under pay-as-you-earn and 1 year of payments under IBR and 6 years of payments under RAP, all of that will count towards the 10 years that you need to reach public service loan forgiveness. But public service loan forgiveness is the cheapest and quickest way to get rid of your student loans in most cases, right? It's just a matter of whether or not your career path aligns with that, right? So, many of you are going to have 3, 4, 5, 6 years of public service loan forgiveness by the time you get through your advanced training, right? It's up to you whether or not you want to continue on in some kind of qualifying employment endeavor to get the rest of that qualifying time, right? But that is still a very real option and people are still earning it. And, it's just a matter of making sure that you're staying on top of that progress as you're working towards it. All right, another question here. I recently had them extend my recertification date. Is that okay? Yes, absolutely. Right. They have been doing a lot of the recertification date extension. Again, if you don't know what your anniversary date is, go grab a student aid data file and upload it into the My Student Loans tool. It will show you what it is right here, right? And if it's in 2026 or even 2027, and you like what your monthly payment is, then great. That's wonderful. Yeah, so just to clarify, I can get public service loan forgiveness and pay at the same time. Yeah, think of it this way. There are 2 clocks ticking, right? If you're in income-driven repayment, like pay-as-you-earn, you have an IDR forgiveness clock ticking, right? Now, pay-as-you-earn has a 20-year clock, right? Now, pay-as-you-earn is going away. If you can go over to IBR 2014, IBR 2014 has a 20-year forgiveness clock. If you're also making payments working for a qualifying employer like you all are at UC Davis, then you are also earning public service loan forgiveness credit, right? So you're getting IDR forgiveness credit and public service loan forgiveness credit, right? Both of those clocks are ticking at the same time, right? You need 10 years of qualifying payments to hit public service loan forgiveness. You need 20 years of qualifying income-driven plan payments to hit forgiveness under pay-as-you-earn or IBR 2014. Right? So which one you hit first is going to be up to your career path, right? Ideally, you would hit public service loan forgiveness first because it's going to be the tax-free version. IDR forgiveness can come with a tax on what's forgiven. Can I go back and add my internship if I am a second-year resident for public service loan forgiveness? Yes, potentially. If you did your internship at an academic or otherwise nonprofit institution, and your loans were using a repayment plan other than SAVE, right? If your loans were in SAVE for the last 12 months, that means they were in that forbearance, not accruing any interest, but that time is not considered to be forgiveness eligible. Right? So as long as your loans were in some other income-driven plan other than SAVE the last 12 months, then you can go back, ask that employer to sign your public service loan forgiveness employment certification form and potentially get that time to count towards public service loan forgiveness. So yeah, I would definitely do that, right? I mean, the sooner and closer you are to that employment time, right, the more likely it is you'll be able to get that credit, right? I mean, if you wait until you finish your residency and now you want to go back and get your internship credit, that's probably going to be more difficult. Right? It's not impossible. It's probably just going to be more difficult. So the sooner you are, or the sooner you try to log that public service loan forgiveness time, the more likely it is you're going to get it. All right, so that's the end of the questions there. And we're right at the top of the hour. Does anybody else have any other questions? I know that's a fire hose of information. I'll get you a link. I'll send Audra a link to this presentation that lives online. And there's lots of other content in here that we didn't get to cover. But are there any other questions while we're here? Oh, I see one. I think I see one. Oh, wow, great one. Is there a good way to stay current on the changes to student loans? Well, I mean, activate that free VIN membership if you have it. VINFoundation.org, right? So this is where I spend a lot of my time. So VIN Foundation, we've got a number of different programs, but student debt is a big one, right? So making sure you're signed up to receive newsletters from VIN Foundation. We do a lot of different targeted education. This is an example of ones we do for internship residency. We're planning to do another internship residency specialty one with ACVIM later this fall. We normally do a new grad playbook for veterinarians who are just graduating from veterinary school in the spring. Right now, we're doing a Borrow Better one for veterinary students. So we're generally trying to put out as much information as we possibly can on student debt and what's changing. I write a blog for vinfoundation.org where a lot of this information lives. So when we start to see common questions come up, how do they pertain to veterinarians at various aspects of repayment? We try to, break that down and post those in these blog posts. Student Debt Center, the message boards, those are probably the best places you can be tied into that will help you stay on top of this stuff and ask lots of questions, right? I mean, the message boards, I know a lot of people, for whatever reason, either aren't cool with trying to do that on the message boards, but it's been the most efficient way we found to provide assistance to the most people possible. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys, but trying to schedule something with you all on the phone is a nightmare, right? It just doesn't happen. So if we can get these things moving on the boards and you can submit some information and then we can reply and then you can get back to it when your schedule allows, we can keep things moving forward and integrate all of the latest and greatest changes into that process, right? So if you need help, please reach out on the message boards, submit a student debt and income signalment form and let us post it on the boards for us. For you, so we can, move that process along. All right. So I think those are the. Oh, I see another chat here. Okay, I see a thank you. Because I can't hear anything on the other side of there, I'm going to assume we're ending the session here. I'm happy to kind of stick around if you guys want to post any additional questions in the Zoom chat or on the Menti for a few more minutes here. But otherwise, I wish you the best of luck and please reach out with any additional questions that come up for you as you work your way through repayment.
Thanks, Tony.
Great. Thank you, Audra. And I'll send you a link to this presentation and again, feel free to reach out with any additional questions that come up. All right, great. Thank you, Audra. I will close down the session and I'll send you a link to the recording as well.